Excellent. We'll give it a few minutes to make sure everybody gets in. It's nice to see all of you. Um, We already have 60 people in, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, MPN Research Advocates. We are thrilled to have you here for session 5 of the MPN Pathways series. For any new participants, I want to say also how happy we are to have you join the MPN Pathways program. My name is Sarah Douglas, and I am the Director of Patient Engagement at the MPN Research Foundation. I really want each of you to feel comfortable reaching out to us with any questions that you have about the Pathways program as you go through it. And I can be reached at patientengagement@mpnrf.org. So please don't hesitate if you have any questions whatsoever. Here is a look at our MPN Pathways Empowered Voices in Research program schedule. We're continuing the program tonight with Patients and Caregiver Voices in Research, featuring Patty Spears and members of our MPN Research Foundation Patient Impact Council. On September 25th, we are going to host a special bonus session introducing the MPN Progression Registry, which is a very important initiative from the MPN Research Foundation. During this session, we will really highlight why patient participation is vital for driving discoveries in MPN progression, treatment strategies, and outcomes. We'll also explain how the medical records and surveys capture real-world patient experiences, and then provide a short tutorial on how to get started and when you're able to enroll. The featured speakers for that webinar are going to be Dr. Ram Paul, who is our medical advisor and principal investigator of the Progression Registry. And then we have Kapila Vijjas, who is our CEO. We have Dr. David Schultz, who is our Chief Scientific Officer, and then Dr. Tyler Parsons, who's a patient and the chair of the Patient Engagement Advisory Committee for the MPN Progression Registry. And then later this year on November 20th, we have Dr. Jane Perlmutter, who will lead our Clinical Trial and Research Protocol 101, which will help participants better understand the structure and purpose of research protocols. And then as we look to next year, which I can't believe we're saying that, but 2026, we will have a session on informed consent. We will also have one on Patient and Caregiver's Guide to Scientific Presentations. And then our last one of the series will be patient-reported outcomes and quality of life in MPNs. So we'll continue to announce the speakers for our 2026 sessions. So please stay connected through our website and our email updates. And as always, you can always find the most current schedule at mpnresearchfoundation.org/MPN Pathways. We want to take a moment to recognize and thank our MPN Pathways sponsors and collaborators for their support of this wonderful program. Have all you here. And then we always start with a few housekeeping items. So for tonight's presentation, we really encourage you to place any of the questions in our Q&A feature. During the presentation, our team will be answering questions as our speakers present. Please only use this chat feature to communicate with one another. So if you want to introduce yourself or just say where you're from, that's where those dialogue can happen. Questions can be missed by our panelists if they're not put in the Q&A feature, so we just want to point that out. If there's time at the end to ask our speakers questions live, we will absolutely take advantage of that, but know that any questions that you ask that are not addressed, I will follow up in an email. And then also as a reminder, we do apologize, but during this session, we are unable to answer really personal medical questions related to your direct care or treatment, but we encourage everyone to email me at patientengagement@mpnrf.org so we can really help navigate you to the right resources and education, help you with the questions that you can maybe ask your provider, or help you even find an MPN specialist closer to you. Tonight's presentation is being recorded. The link will also be provided to the MPN Pathways group after the webinar. The evaluation of the session will be sent to you in the post-event email, so please be sure to complete the evaluation for this session to earn credit towards your overall certification. And then it's my great pleasure to introduce today's wonderful speakers. So first off, we have Patty Spears, who is a 2-time cancer survivor and national research advocate. Patty leads patient engagement programs at UNC Lineberger and serves in multiple national leadership roles to ensure that the patient's voice shapes cancer research. And then we have TJ Hoopert, who was diagnosed with ET in 2016. TJ is a member of our Patient Impact Council, and she's been really working hard to connect with patients and raise awareness to improve detection and quality of life for those with MPN. And then we have Andrea Spica. So she's living with an MPN since 1998 and a stem cell transplant survivor. Andrea also serves on our Patient Impact Council. She's been sharing her experience to support patients and advocate for research and education. And then we have Ned Weinshanker, who was diagnosed with primary myelofibrosis in 2018. Ned is a member of our Patient Impact Council as well, and he works very hard to advance personalized medicine and support for MPN patients nationwide. And then we have Ben Hohenbrink, diagnosed with ET at 33, which progressed to myelofibrosis. Ben is also a recent stem cell transplant survivor and member of our Patient Impact Council. He does a great job of sharing his story to drive research, awareness, and proactive treatment approaches. Our agenda for today. So Patty's going to start off the webinar by sharing how to really integrate patient and caregivers' voices in research, including how advocates can encourage and engage with researchers to ensure studies address what really matters most to patients and caregivers. And then we will hear from our Patient Impact Council members about their patient research advocacy initiatives and how they have contributed to MPN research. So with that, I will hand it over to Patty. And Patty, sure, just let me know when you want me to advance the slides.
Okay, that'll be great. So I will introduce myself to the group. It's so nice to be here. I'm really glad I was invited to the MPN Research Foundation and with other patient advocates. It's really exciting. I am a cancer survivor since 1999 with breast cancer and underwent all the treatments in a clinical trial, and then diagnosed with liver cancer in 2022. And I also have a connection with MPN just through my father had ET, and then 10 years later it progressed to AML. He didn't qualify for a stem cell transplant and passed from his disease, but I think this organization is so important because I didn't know it was here. I think it might have helped us kind of navigate our way through the ET and then the AML at the end. I think it's a little different than normal AML. So it's really nice to be here. Next slide. So what I concentrate on is patient and caregiver voices in research. And being a patient and caregiver for a long time, I also have a research background, which is not necessary, but it kind of propelled me into this area of research advocacy. And so what I'm going to do today is kind of tell you who are patient advocates that are interested in research. Why are you including patient advocates? What would you want advocates to do in your research? When should you introduce advocates? And then how do you do it? How do researchers and patients engage with each other? So it's kind of from both sides, from the advocate side and the researcher side of, how do we do this interaction with each other? So I'm going to try to walk you through this, and I'm going to try to give some examples as well. So next slide. So next slide. So we'll talk about who. So this is some of my advocates at Lineberger. So who is a research advocate? So in 2011, the National Cancer Institute actually had like brought some people together and they wrote a report on research advocacy, and they came up with a definition, and it's really someone who brings a non-scientific viewpoint to the research process and communicates the collective patient perspective. So even though I'm in the room and I'm a research advocate, I don't necessarily advocate like looking for my own treatment options. I'm there for all of the patients that have ever been diagnosed with cancer or with a specific cancer or with any kind of chronic or terminal disease. And so, I tend to bring that knowledge to the table, and it's a broad knowledge that I try to bring to the table. And I also stress that even though I had a science background, it makes it a little easier to navigate sometimes. You don't need a science background to be a research advocate. You just need to have a real strong interest in learning more about research and learning more about science. You'll learn it along the way. You don't have to be an expert out of the box. So next slide, please. So, because you've probably heard of other types of advocacy besides research advocacy, you've probably heard of fundraising. I was a breast cancer survivor to begin with, so I did a lot of Komen races and other things to raise money. Policy, I'm interested in policy. I'm on some policy committees right now. And support, I actually facilitated a support group and attended a support group for quite a few years. So you really get the idea of what what all patients are going through kind of collectively, but research advocacy is kind of different, and it's in its own little box. And who can be a research advocate? Pretty much anyone. So I've got it listed here. You can be diagnosed with cancer or not. You can be a caregiver of someone with cancer. We really learn a lot from our caregivers. You might have had a friend or a close person affected by cancer that really propelled you into advocacy, or you could be a community member that really tries to bring health information back to the community. Next slide, please. So, a research advocacy in general, what I say is we really bring the collective patient and community perspective to research. We make a broad impact on the research process, especially working with foundations like MPN and other. I work a lot with the National Cancer Institute. You can make a really big impact. And you can have an interest in science. You don't have to be a scientist to be a research advocate. I think I've said that like 3 times because I think it's really, really important. Next slide, please. So next we'll go over why. Why is it important to actually have patients and caregivers and community members at the table in research? Because, there's a perception of value and everybody has a different perspective. And so even when you're talking about different things, just having different stakeholders at the table is really important. And I bring here, some of the difference in values that are seen in different buckets. I work a lot with government and nonprofit in the clinical trials area, where really the public good is the outcome of all the trials. Whereas if you work with any pharmaceutical companies, it's always about the bottom line and money and approval, right? And then, you can work on in an individual level, it's all about you. What's it going to do for me? And the population level, it's really about benefiting everyone. I think public health is so important these days. And then, of course, between the patient and physician, it's really important to have that difference there as well. Like seeing the difference between what the patient values and what the physician values. Next slide, please. So this kind of depicts what, if a doctor looks at one thing, they're going to see it one way and they might love it. Whereas if a patient looks at it, they look at it at a different angle and it's going to look a little different. And this has been kind of documented as well in some of the studies where oncologists might really value survival over everything. Whereas patients might say, hey, wait a minute, I actually value quality of life as well. So kind of bringing both perspectives to the table is really, really important. Next slide, please. And so what do we do? What do patients do? Next slide. Our tissue procurement guy gave a demonstration of tissue using Play-Doh for our advocates in that picture. But advocates can do things in all different kinds of research, from basic research, which is in the laboratory, to translation, to clinic, to epidemiology and population studies, all the way to drug approval. The FDA has patient representatives. I'm an FDA patient representative. I haven't done anything for them in a while, but I've done that. And I think I've touched every one of these buckets, but they can be involved in every aspect of research that goes on. Next slide, please. So adding the patient voice is really important. So I just wanted to kind of ground everyone on what I was talking about with laboratory research, clinical research, and population research. And they really, they have distinct buckets, but they're not really distinct buckets because they kind of bleed into each other. So basic research is looking at questions related to nature and how things work. And then when you move into translational work, research, you're taking that basic knowledge that you learned, which is really, really important, and try to apply it to a medical problem and finding solutions to a medical problem. And then once you do the translational research, then you can go into clinical research that takes all this basic and translational research and really tries to find those solutions and studies them in clinical trials. And then clinical trials is really where the rubber hits the road and where the drugs are approved and first interventions get into patients. I've done several clinical trials. I think they're really, really important. And I think that's where we really see the true benefit of the research that has gone on years prior in the laboratory. So it's all connected. So when you see basic research funding, it's just as important as a clinical trial funding if we want more clinical trials coming down the road. And then population research is really, really important. We have a lot of databases out there about demographic data, about, in the cancer world is all about cancer. And it's really, really important to be able to analyze that data and track that data and look at that data. And a lot of our population researchers do that. And then there's all different clinical trials in there as well. Like there's survivorship trials, there's observational trials, there's, implementation trials into the community. So there's a really breadth of research that you can be involved in. Next slide, please. And so, what can we do in the different buckets? You might think that, in laboratory research, what can I do? Well, I think being involved in laboratory research, you can kind of bring that patient to the table and you add urgency to their research. I had a vaccine clinical trial. I went to Ben Vincent's lab, met all of his young people in his lab, and it was so cool that they met someone that participated in a vaccine clinical trial, and they were doing basic research on vaccines for cancer. So they really asked me a lot of questions, and you can really make sure that the research that's done is done for purpose and done to enhance patient lives in the end. Clinical trials, of course, patients are really heavily involved in all different areas where you can really look at the patient burden, the broadening inclusion criteria, like everybody to qualify for a trial, patient relevant endpoints. I think those are all things that we can really bring to the table. When I hear of somebody saying, oh, this infusion is only 15 minutes instead of 30 minutes. Well, no, it takes me half a day to get to that 15-minute infusion. So I've never been to a clinic for 15 minutes. So, I think just, knowing what that patient burden is so important to bring to the physicians and the people doing the trials. And population, it's really important too. I think one of the things that I talk about is communicating science to the public. And the thing is that you really need to communicate in a way that everybody understands, and communicate your research to the broader community is so, so important to really build that trust between our institutions and the community. Next slide, please. And so here's kind of some things that we do in these different buckets. At Lineberger and at other places in research projects, in large programs, like the Specialized Program of Research Excellence. Your PO1 and UO1s are type of grant mechanisms that are really big. Stand Up to Cancer and your Department of Defense grants are really big, and they usually require advocates or have advocates involved. Individual projects can also have advocates involved, usually just one or two. I'm involved in several of those. You really get to know the investigator and their research, and you can do lab visits and stuff. And then a lot of our grants now at Lineberger have patient and community advisory boards associated with them. And so that's where they can really get the community and other patients into their research. In clinical trials, we work closely with our clinical trials office with protocol review, a review of new trials, and ongoing accrual. We provide feedback on trial design, patient community perspectives. There's a lot we can do there. And then research materials. We spend a lot of time. I just sent out a material today for review for our patient advocate group and already have 6 back. So, review informed consent, any educational materials. I feel like it's really important to get the patient viewpoint on it, whether it was understandable and whether it was actionable. We review all the recruitment info and anything public facing, including websites and any public education and anything you do on social media. I think if you send it through a patient before you put it out there, it might make it a little bit more understandable to the general public. Next slide, please. And how do we do this? So next slide. How do we connect our researchers and our patients and caregivers? So I'm going to walk you through kind of like, a timeline of how you would do this, because I feel like I learn more by learning from others and how others have done it. So this is going to be the hard part, but click. So when we match a researcher with a patient for a project, we have them meet and talk about the project and next steps. And with Zoom, it's so easy. Next slide, please. Next, click. And then what the researcher can do too, in talking to the patient is really invite them to laboratory meetings. I go to a lab meeting every week for one of the researchers that I work closely with. And I feel like I'm learning more every time I go. I still don't, it's hard, but it's really fun to get to know the kids in the lab and the people in the lab and things like that. I'll learn more as I go. And I've seen the lab and I've seen all these machines, that they use, and it's kind of exciting. It's neat to see. Next click. And then give regular updates. If you really get matched to someone as a researcher or as an advocate, make sure you get regular updates, either written or via Zoom. It's easy to communicate. And next click, please. And then communicating the results. So I just wrote a blog for Oncobytes, summarizing a publication that just came out on a project that I'm on and bringing 3 clinical trials together. So I think it's made for public, it's at an 8th grade level, and it's something that we need to do more of, is get this information that was published in a scientific journal out to the public in some way, and we can help you with that. Next slide, please. And this is a long click. So I also volunteer with the Alliance for Clinical Trials in Oncology. And that's one of the governmental clinical trials group that runs a lot of the phase 3 clinical trials. And they really try to answer critical questions for patients. It's not about approving drugs and making money. It's about patients. And so we have a group of advocates that are associated with the Alliance for Clinical Trials. I think there's 24 of us now for the Alliance. And I'm going to show you just how we interact along the whole life cycle of how a trial is developed. And this is my rendition of a trial development. So somebody comes up with an idea for a trial and it's actually presented in committee meetings. We participate in those meetings. We can bring up questions. We can ask questions. There's other people in the room like oncologists, surgeons, radiologists, nurses, clinical research professionals, community oncologists. There's all these people in the room. And so we can make comments. Next click, please. And then once it's talked about a lot and it gets approval from the chairs of the committee, they write a concept. The concept is about 10 pages, and then that goes for review, scientific review, the SCRC, which I don't know what it stands for. It's scientific review. And we have an advocate on that that reviews that at each point. So the advocate on the committee reviews the concept written for that committee. And so they can write their written comments down and get their point of view across. After it goes through that committee, it goes up to the National Cancer Institute Steering Committee for review. Next click. It either comes back or goes forward. And if it goes forward, it goes to protocol is written. So at the Alliance, we have protocol development teams that are multidisciplinary, and we get an advocate on that team as well. So I put the advocate from that committee on that team, and then they can look at that point, they can look at eligibility criteria. They can look at who can get in the trial, the patient burden in the trial. At that point, the consent form is written. All the patient-reported outcomes are developed at that point and added to the trial as well. So there's a lot more that they can look at, and they're in from the get-go, from draft 0 to draft 4. Next click. And then the trial is open and everybody celebrates, but it also comes back to committee. Is it accruing well? Is there problems? Are there amendments? And you can comment on those. It goes to the Data Safety Monitoring Board. We have an advocate that sits on there. Actually, it's Jane Perlmutter that will be here in November, I think. So she's very good. And then you can click again. And then the trial's done, and we're not done yet. What we do at the Alliance is we try to write a public results summary, and we have about 70 on the website. We're always changing the process. They're hard to do, but we think it's important to get the trial results out to the community. So we help with that as well. Click again to the next slide. And when. So when do you involve patient advocates? Next. So at the get-go, when the grant is submitted, if you're doing a project and it's an idea and you don't even have funding yet, you can engage an advocate, you can engage a patient. In the application process, we can give feedback, we can help you with your lay and public abstract. And I'll probably say this 3 times too, how important the lay and public abstract is, because when you apply for grants at like nonprofits or even government institutions or other places, especially nonprofits, they have donors. Their donors don't necessarily have a science background. They need to understand what research is being funded to actually make sure that their money is going to what they intended it to go to, and plus if they want to make more donations. So it's really important for those foundations to have that lay abstract so they can really talk about the research being done so the patient can really help with that. Sometimes there's letters of support that are needed and bio sketches, and they can do all that. There also, you need to look closely, researchers that apply for grants. Whenever I connect with a researcher, I say, read the RFA carefully because it will tell you whether an advocate is going to review your grant. And at Lineberger, we review all the pilot and stimulus funded grants. And if a patient advocate or caregiver or community member is reviewing your grant, you need to know that. And then that's really important to get your point across when you write your grant of how important it is to patients. And then results, presenting your results to the public, always, always important. Next slide, please. So how does this work? This is an example of applying for a grant. So you have an idea for a research project, yay. Next click. And then you identify a funding opportunity, even better, but the funder requires engagement of patient advocates. What do you do? So next click. So I actually wrote a paper in Future Oncology that kind of goes through these steps of engagement, but the researcher really needs to think through these things. And I have a list of what advocates should think about as well. But, you know, why does an advocate need to be engaged in this research? Who should it be? Should it be someone with the disease? If it's on stem cell transplant, do you need someone with stem cell transplant experience? If it's on graft versus host, do you need someone with that? So you need to know who you want, and then what do you want them to do? Will it be something that you meet regularly with them for, or just once a year to get like an advisory type of thing? And then how will you engage? Will it be through meetings, through Zoom, through written? You know, how are you going to do it? So really, there's a lot to be done to really make the engagement meaningful. Next up. But once you decide that and you find an advocate magically, it's really hard sometimes, but it is doable. Your mentor, I would ask, and also the foundations that concentrate on your disease, I would ask. And then as patient advocates, you can make connections as well. But present your project to the advocate, review any of the requirements, make sure you've got all those requirements down pat. A lot of times, you know, they need one, they need two, they need to know these different things. Some require, for breast cancer, require you to be a survivor. Some you can be a caregiver, things like that. Review from the patient perspective. So I look at impact statements all the time, and I look at lay abstracts and personal statements. When I review grants, I love to read the personal statements because I love to read about what got them into this area of research. So next tick, please. And then you submit your proposal, and then you let the advocate know that it was submitted. And if I'm an advocate on the grant, I try to say, hey, did you submit it? And try to get a copy of that final submission. And then time goes by depending on the funders, and then you can click again, and then you hear whether you got funded or not. Let the advocate know, even if you didn't get funded. I was on one grant application, I think about 4 times. It was a large application. And then it finally and they would contact me each year that they reapplied, and I would update my letter and send it back in. And then they finally got funded, and it's an awesome project, right? But it's like, oh, what was that about? But sometimes it takes a couple of cycles, and it's okay. Rejection is okay. It happens a lot in science. So it just, you know, keep the advocate involved along the way. And, you know, I find it really neat to be involved with someone over time. And then all of a sudden, not only one grant will hit, but a couple will hit at one time. And it's really exciting. Next slide, please. And so I'll just explain here a little bit about one of the things that I think we as patient and caregivers and community members can bring to the researchers is how will this research benefit patients, and conveying that sense of urgency. Next click, please. And, you know, and usually grants have an impact statement section, or how will this impact? And how you write about impact is really complicated. And I've talked about this a lot, and finally I decided to make some examples because everybody said, well, what is a good impact statement? And I said, I don't know. I can notice a bad one and then I notice a good one, but I'm not really sure. So I made a slide for that. So next slide. And the NIH training actually had some of this in there. The big thing is to avoid words like impact and effect. So impact is a very vague word, just like effect is a very vague word. Use more precise words or verbs, those action words, to explain the impact. So I'll give you an example of that. So you'll click again. And so this was from the NIH plain language training. So if you say Dr. Jones had an impact on medicine, well, you're saying that he had an impact on medicine, and that's great, or she had an impact on medicine, and that's great, but it doesn't tell me a lot. So if you said Dr. Jones influences women to enter the field of medicine, that explains to me the impact. And you can click again. And then in science, and some science things that I've read over the years, when triple negative breast cancer became really a real big problem because it was identifiable but not treatable. You read this a lot in grants. The results from this research will lead to new drugs to treat triple negative breast cancer. I think I read that a million times, but that's not really hitting me where I need to be hit. So I made up two. You can click again to be more specific. I would like to hear that this will be an oral drug which will reduce the cost for patients by decreasing clinic visits. You're thinking about the patient and you're thinking about delivery, or it's more specific to the target, which has potential to have fewer side effects when given to patients. So you're thinking about the patient and you're thinking about drugs that are better. So that tells me that you know who the patients are, you know what the disease is, and you know where you need to go. Next slide, please. And this is lay abstract. So we have this one pager that we have on our website for all of our researchers, because I think this is an important document. It's where you can really explain what your research is. You can explain why your research is important to patients. What questions are you answering? Why do you think it will be successful? And how will it improve the lives of patients? And so we have this little sheet that you can use to help you through it. But really, it's like knowing your audience. Organize and filter is probably the biggest thing to do. You don't need to put everything in there. Deleting words, adjectives really give you nothing. You really need to use action verbs, and you need to filter out the stuff that's not needed, and you need to organize it. You need to tell a story. Sometimes people just jump into something without giving me an introduction. I love an introduction, and then it gets me set up for what you're going to say, because people reading it. And nowadays, if you do a good lay abstract, a lot of the times people reading your grant might not be like versed in that grant, that area of research. So you really need to make it so that everybody can understand. And I think if everybody can understand, even researchers can understand. So I think this is an important document. And for foundations that do funding and things like that, this is critical. Next slide, please. And this is where us as patients and caregivers can really help. I edit a lot of patient public abstracts. Next slide, please. And so I'll tell you just a little bit, if I've got a few minutes, I'll go through this quickly, about engagement at Lineberger. Next slide, we meet by Zoom now. Next slide. So we engage patient advocates that can be patients or caregivers, and community advocates. We think they bring a lot to the table. Next slide, please. And this is my idea of community outreach and engagement. I'm in part of the COE office, which came on after I started at Lineberger. But, it's really about bringing, the patient and community interest into Lineberger research, and then bringing Lineberger research out to the community and forming these partnerships. And really, I think this keeps us more patient focused in all that we do. Next slide, please. And so what we did was we have the Lineberger Excellence in Advocacy program that encompasses all of our advocate engagement, from our community advisory boards to our research council to the PFAC. Where we can bring common things together, like recruitment, compensation. We have a compensation plan, training. We do training. We have an Aspire program for training, do assessments, where we just finished our second one, and engagement. Next slide, please. And so here's some of the activities that we've done and some of our advocates, and we can track things. So we've done a lot of grant reviews in our developmental funding program. We've engaged patients, we've matched them to researchers. There's very few we can't match, but we do need more in blood diseases. So an open invitation. Next slide, please. And so it takes a village to do this. So I don't do it by myself. I do it with other partners in COE, the Community Outreach Engagement, Jennifer Potter and Veronica Carlisle, who is our community outreach specialist. And so it really takes a village to put this into a cancer center and have it work. Next slide. I think that's the end.
Thank you very much, Patty. A great presentation, lots of great information. Now we're going to kind of tune to our Patient Impact Council members. We have started some research advocacy initiatives here at the MPN Research Foundation. So I brought a few of them together just to kind of share with the Pathways participants what they've been working on and really, how they've impacted MPN research. So TJ, I'm going to advance the slide and let you take it away.
Thanks, Sarah. Excited to be with all of you tonight to talk a little bit about what advocacy looks like from a patient perspective. So I've been a member of the Patient Impact Council for about 1.5 years now. I am an ET patient for 9 years, and then I am also a caregiver, as my father has myelofibrosis and has for just about 4 years. So wanted to share quickly a few of the impacts I believe that this organization has had for me. And I think that this is definitely something that can transfer over to many other people as well. We were part of the MPN Challenge last year, which is an opportunity for researchers to submit proposals for grant funding. And the Patient Impact Council had the opportunity to review and evaluate proposals as a team. And we, I don't come from a scientific background. So some of the things that Patty was saying really hit home for me, because it's really critical that we as patients and caregivers are involved, because we give it perspective. We take research and we bring it to life. And so, getting into some of the proposals that were shared, they gave us perspective from a layperson side of things. So I was able to understand. And then if I'm being honest, I Googled too when I needed some clarity. But along the way, not only did I learn about MPNs in more detail, which I'm a big believer in knowledge is power, but I also saw what the future looks like. And as a patient and as a caregiver, that was so reassuring to see the army of individuals that are fighting for us and continuing to move progress forward in the way of research every single day. So I think that's really reassuring for us as patients, and I'm thankful that I've been able to witness that firsthand. I'll wrap up by saying that one piece of advice that I would offer is that I have long believed that if you want to experience progress, you have to participate in it. And so as patients, as caregivers, and even in the research community, continue to ask questions when you encounter something that doesn't add up for you as a patient, as a caregiver. Be a student of your disease, participate and understand clinical trials, and even dig in and support other MPN patients wherever you can. And researchers, if you're hearing this message as well, it's really so simple. When you need perspective from us, just ask. There are so many of us that are willing to help, move the needle as well, right alongside you, and participate in clinical trials and studies, because we want to drive progress just as much as you do. Thank you.
Fantastic, TJ. Thank you so much. And Andrea is ready to go. Andrea, yes. Oh, you're muted, Andrea. I'm going to try to unmute you.
Okay.
There you go. There you go.
I'm back. Okay, good. I would like to thank everyone for coming today and listening to us, and hopefully getting some impulse to help with the advocacy area. While I have also reviewed proposals and informed consent and a lot of patient-facing material for NPN-RF, with my marketing and advertising background, having 3 cancers and stem cell transplant, along with participating in 3 different clinical trials. They have 2 here, but it was actually 3. I hope that I can bring some background and some information to NPN-RF and other groups that might be looking for patient input. Patients can really broaden their impact with their doctors, wherever their hospitals are, whatever they go. If you communicate with your doctor and tell them what's going on, that information is usually passed on, whether it's a drug or whatever it could be. So we also push that patients broaden the researcher's perspective by lived-in experience. I am one of the leaders for the North Texas Patient Support Group, where we talk about a lot of these things and take information from the council, or excuse me, the support group, and give it back to either MPN Research or the other organizations. Truthfully, I started at 50 years old with my big cancer, the blood cancer, myelofibrosis, and without the information that I received online and from other MPN groups, I never would have gotten to the transplant that I got to 7 years ago, and I'm feeling really, really good. While I hope to broaden my background more and give more back because people were great with me, not only do I want to be a patient advocate, but I would like to, especially after hearing the talk we just had from Patty, I would love to be a research advocate as well. This way, giving back what I possibly can to MPN research. Again, I would love to have people give as much input as you can, but really the most important message I think that I can give everyone is to be your own advocate, your own patient advocate. And it was just mentioned before that you really are the one that needs to ask questions. Yes, trust your doctor, but trust and verify, if you will. Talk to the doctors, talk to anyone you can, get on the different MPN sites, look at the MPN research organization. They have an incredible amount of research, and we would just love more input from you, but you have to be your advocate. You have to read, you have to ask questions, you have to write things down and bring people with you, because it's difficult when a doctor is talking to you to get all the information in your head. I don't know about you, but I always brought someone and they help clarify things for me. Ask doctors if you can use your iPhone and tape what they're saying, whatever you can do. I thank you for being here, and I hope that you will participate with all of us in giving the patient impact and the patient views to anyone who will listen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrea. Hey, Ned, you can get Ned off mute.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Let me try to get your camera started.
It says I can't start it. It's disabled by the host. Okay, now.
There we go. Awesome. Thank you, Ned. Go ahead.
Whoops. Something came up in front. My name is Ned Weinschenker. I am an MF patient, as diagnosed in late 2018. I've been a patient research advocate and a patient advocate ever since I was diagnosed. And I'm also a researcher. I've been in the pharmaceutical industry and I've been in academics, and I have a background in chemistry. I've been in a clinical trial for 6.5 years. It's going very well. And my participation in the MPN Research Foundation Patient Impact Council has been fantastic. The ability to learn about everything that's going on, meeting with clinicians and researchers at the roundtable meetings we have each year, being able to review the research grant applications that have come in. It's just an incredible opportunity. And as I said, I found my clinical trial from the MPN Research Foundation website. And what Andrea said about being your own advocate, doing your own research, looking everywhere, asking as many questions as possible, absolutely critical. And through the Patient Impact Council and with Sarah's help, I've actually been now involved in 4 different pharmaceutical companies' patient boards, where we get to review research projects, protocols, informed consent forms, which is really important because that's what the patient gets to read when they go in for a clinical trial, and making sure it's in a format that's understandable to the patient, not just to the nurse and not just to the doctor. It has to be understandable to the patient so that they have more impetus to join that trial. And that's really, really important. And this note at the bottom, patient be patient, I think clinicians really have to drive this home with the patients. These MPNs are diseases that have probably been developing over years before they become evident and before they're diagnosed. And for that reason, the drugs that we take to ameliorate these or to reverse the disease, they take a long time to work. Patients need to know that they need to be patient. A lot of these clinical trials, they go 24 weeks before you get any feedback, because that's how long it takes to start to reverse some of the effects of the disease, and the drugs are slow in acting to reverse this. One of the other things I'm doing, because I'm really interested in research and new opportunities to treat MPNs, I've teamed up with some researchers at Utah State University, the Huntsman Cancer Institute, and the University of Utah, and we've come up with a new potential treatment for MPNs and maybe other cancers. And I encourage the group to come to the MPN Research Foundation to get some funding for this. And after about 1.5 years of working with the group, we finally got funded just a few weeks ago. And the research is just taking off now. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited about being an advocate. I do anything and everything that Sarah asked me to do as far as the council is concerned, and helping companies and helping other patients. So I think I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Ned. Great advice. And thanks for always saying yes. All right, excellent. And then we have Ben here. Take it away, Ben.
All right. Thank you very much. So for me, some of my lived experience and what I've done and really helping with the Research Foundation through the MPN challenge reviews, and then even getting involved with research and other clinical trial protocols, informed consent documents, a lot of patient-facing materials, including websites and branding materials, and how does it really ring true to a patient perspective. And it was interesting as we've kind of gone through some of it to actually see how it changed, right? Is some of the companies and groups had one path that they were going down, and after receiving some of the feedback, how they've actually changed kind of their tact and path forward, to actually resonate better with the patient and caregiver audiences. So, I've seen in many of them that, it can be very overwhelming. There's a lot of technical information, a lot of jargon that is used. But again, and I think Patty hit on it really well, is making sure that those lay statements and how does it really translate well to a patient, I think is super critical. So providing that feedback to the people that are doing either the research or the funding requests, whatever they may be, to actually get some of that voice back to them, I think is wonderful. I think it's also important for patients and caregivers to have a voice and to be present with some of this, because we bring a different perspective. And I'd say even the patient and caregiver perspective is going to be significantly different. I know through some of the stuff that I had gone through with the stem cell transplant, my experience versus those that were being my caregivers were related, but very different, right? The burden on me was way different from what was on them. And they were equally difficult. So having somebody speak up for those people, those segments, to actually advance things is really good. So I guess from an advice perspective, for those that are doing the research, investigations, things like that, keep doing it, right? I mean, I've benefited from those that came before me to really drive some of that forward. For the patient caregivers and the patients, the caregivers that are advocating, keep doing it. Our voices are very important. And actually, I'm finding that people really want to hear what we have to say as well, which is fantastic. So keep advocating for yourself, keep advocating for others. So again, wanted to thank Patty, the MPN RF, Sarah, and everybody for this tonight. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ben. That's wonderful advice from all of our members who really greatly appreciate having all those different perspectives. We do have maybe a couple minutes for questions. I know that my team has been answering questions as we were presenting. Let me look here. And Patty, if you want to come off mute and be on camera, I know there's some questions here. Any that you can see that you would like to answer? I know one of the big questions was, can you work with pharmaceutical companies and not just academic centers? And I think, our Patient Impact Council members really touched on that we do review protocols for our clinical or our industry partners. But yeah, if you can just explain kind of if you've done any work with that or how you approach something like that.
Yeah, I have. I've done work with pharmaceutical industries when I was working at NC State. So, my advocacy had nothing to do with my job. I worked with Pfizer and Genentech on patient-reported outcomes. Sometimes they have different projects that they set up that they have patient input on. It's not necessarily just protocols. I think I did one protocol, but they have different projects. And then Pfizer, I've worked on several different projects. But now that I'm in my job has more to do with my advocacy, I try not to do that because I think it's really important as patients for us to do the conflict of interest as well. So when I do a slide, that conflict of interest stays with you for 2 years. And I disclose everything about anything that I do with pharmaceutical industries. I think it's really important for us as patients to be upfront about that as well. But I really love my pharmaceutical partners. I actually run into them all the time at meetings. I really like them a lot. I have some really good friends in the pharmaceutical industry that I've worked with and just reconnected with one at ASCO just recently. So it's really, really kind of fun. But now I'm really in the academic world, which I think gives me a little freedom. And I really focus my advocacy on government with the National Cancer Institute, as well as with nonprofit like ASCO and ACR, the big cancer organizations, and then the little cancer organizations around Lineberger and stuff, but different things. So I think it's just a matter of, try things and see if you like it as an advocate. And some people just really love, if you work with someone really good at a pharmaceutical company, it's really rewarding and things like that. So I think, try it and see. I feel like, we try to have enough opportunities for our advocates so they can find something that they like. Some love to review things and do things on computers. Some people like to be out in public and say things, So you just have to have to try different things and see where you fit.
Yeah, that's great. One of the questions is, what is the best way to get involved on a local level? You know, I know connecting with the MPN Research Foundation, they can help, you know, on a bigger level, but someone that's fairly new to a community, they're interested in patient advocacy and research. Is it something that they talk to their MPN specialist about or their hematologist, or is there another way to kind of get involved with the cancer center that they're working at?
Yeah, well, the cancer center is the first place and your hematologist is the first one, and they'll know of different things close by. And also, you know, national organizations sometimes have a local presence and sometimes there's local organizations. So I started with Susan G. Komen, but at the local level, worked at the local level volunteering before I started volunteering at the national level type of thing, and started with somebody. I was at a talk at Lineberger, and this was before I worked or knew anybody there. They were talking about clinical trials, and somebody asked me about, because I was talking about the Alliance or CLB at that time. And they said, how do we get involved? And I said, well, two people just talked in this room. And I said, and one was a surgeon, one was an oncologist. I think I would go talk to them.
Yeah.
So if you're at a meeting and somebody's talking, you go, oh, I kind of like this person. Go up to them, say, hey, you know, I'm really interested in what you're doing. And
Yeah.
it might start something.
Well, and it's, you know, I think we found our Patient Impact Council, it's great to have those conversations, you know, and they're not as scary as you think they are. They really want to hear what you have to say, and it really benefits them greatly. So have those conversations. Absolutely. They want to hear from patients always.
And that's one of the things we ask on our survey from our advocate point of view. Do you feel like you were heard?
Yeah.
Do you feel like you were valued? So we ask all those questions. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Well, I know we're going to wrap up here. Patty, thank you so much. Thank you to our Patient Impact Council members for being here. This was a fantastic session. Anything that wasn't answered, we'll be sure to follow up with those Q&As. I'll get Patty's advice on those. We'll send you the recording. We'll send you the evaluation. Let's go through this. Our next session, we're very excited for our next session. Mark it down. It's Thursday, September 25th from 5 to 6:30 p.m. Central. No, I don't know what that is, but got an extra C in there, but Central Time. But as always, we'll make sure to get those recordings to you if you aren't able to attend the day of. Again, we will send you the evaluation for session 5. And with that, I will wish everybody a good night. Thank you for being here. If there's anything that we can do for you, please email us. It's patientingagement@mpnrf.org. We're here for you. Have a wonderful rest of your night. And thanks again, Patty.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.